The audience expected tension. They did not expect a war of smiles, silence, and carefully sharpened words. One host, one guest, one studio in London, and a confrontation that would not stay polite for long. Kevin O'Sullivan had dismantled politicians, celebrities, and billionaires on live television. But tonight, facing Meghan Markle alone under the studio lights, even he had no idea how personal this was about to become. The studio lights of what just happened washed the set in deep blues and golds, reflecting off the glass panels behind the desk. London's skyline glowed on the massive LED wall like a quiet observer to something it wouldn't be able to stop. The audience applauded as Kevin O'Sullivan adjusted the papers in front of him, his black blazer crisp, his striped shirt slightly open at the collar, relaxed but alert. Then she walked in. Meghan Markle moved with practiced confidence, her dark hair pulled into a low, elegant bun, wearing a fitted sleeveless dark green top that contrasted sharply with the cool tone studio. She smiled for the cameras, not for the room. The mug with Kevin's face branded on it waited on the table between them like a silent joke. Neither of them acknowledged. Applause rose again. Meghan sat, crossing her legs smoothly, chin high, eyes already scanning Kevin with a polite, distant curiosity, as if she were inspecting furniture rather than a man. Kevin leaned forward slightly, fingers open on the desk. "Tonight we have Meghan Markle with us," he said in a measured voice. "Welcome. Thank you," Meghan replied brightly. "I'm happy to be here." The words were warm. The tone was not. Kevin smiled faintly. "You don't visit British studios very often anymore." Meghan tilted her head. "I go where the conversations are meaningful," it was said sweetly. The implication was not. A ripple of light discomfort passed through the audience. Kevin didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "Let's start with something simple," he said. "You've spoken often about reclaiming your voice. Do you feel Britain ever truly listened to you?" Meghan's smile tightened into something polished. "I think Britain listened very closely," she said. "Whether it understood is a different matter." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a diplomatic way of saying the country failed you." "I prefer to say expectations failed reality," she replied calmly. "On all sides." Her tone was smooth, almost rehearsed, but the faint edge beneath it was unmistakable. Kevin noticed it. The audience did too. Kevin folded his hands. "Yet you continue to build your public narrative largely through British and American media. Doesn't that suggest you still care deeply about British opinion?" Meghan let out a soft, amused breath. "Kevin, I care about impact," she said, "not approval." The words landed sharper than her smile suggested. Kevin leaned back a fraction. "Impact without accountability can look an awful lot like control." A flicker passed through Meghan's eyes. "Only if you assume the public is powerless," she replied. Coolly, "which I sincerely don't." Kevin's lips curved slightly. "Interesting, because many would argue your public image is managed with remarkable precision." Meghan lifted one eyebrow. "Is that meant to be an accusation or a compliment?" "An observation," Kevin answered. "Then observe this," she said, leaning subtly forward. "Every public figure manages their image. The difference is whether people resent you for doing it well." The audience murmured. A few uneasy laughs followed. Kevin tapped his pen once against the desk. "You make it sound like criticism is always rooted in envy." "Isn't it?" Meghan asked lightly. Kevin's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Sometimes it's rooted in consequence." Meghan smiled wider. "That's a very British way of romanticizing judgment." The tension thickened. Not loud, not explosive, but unmistakably present. This was no longer a friendly interview. This was measurement. Kevin shifted his weight forward again. "Let's talk about perception," he said. "Many feel you left the UK while still demanding moral authority over it." Meghan's eyes hardened for the first time. "That's a false premise," she said. "I left a role." "I did not leave responsibility," Kevin countered immediately. "Yet responsibility usually involves proximity." "So does toxicity," Meghan replied without hesitation. A sharp intake of breath swept through the audience. Kevin blinked once. Then he smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "I see," he said quietly. "So Britain was toxic." Meghan shrugged slightly. "Certain structures were. You'd know something about that, wouldn't you?" The jab was coated in velvet, but it was a jab. Kevin didn't interrupt her this time. He let the silence grow for half a second too long, enough for every viewer to feel it. "Well," he said slowly, "we've established the tone rather quickly." Man lifted her mug, took a slow sip, then set it down deliberately. "I prefer efficiency," she said. "It saves everyone time." Kevin nodded once. "Then let's not waste any." The camera tightened on both faces. Two smiles, no warmth left between them. And as the audience leaned forward in their seats, one thing had become painfully clear. This interview was no longer about answers. It was about who would lose control first. The smiles were still on their faces, but behind the studio lights something had already shifted. This was no longer an interview. It had become a contest of endurance. Rehook. Kevin O'Sullivan had waited long enough, and Meghan Markle had made one critical mistake. She assumed he would keep playing polite. Part 2. When the questions stopped being gentle. The camera pulled back to its wider angle as the applause from the previous exchange faded into an uneasy silence. Kevin glanced at his notes again, but this time he didn't lift the papers. He left them where they were, flat and untouched, as if he no longer needed them. Meghan sat comfortably in her chair, shoulders back, legs crossed, one hand loosely around the mug. She looked unbothered, almost entertained. Kevin spoke again, his tone still controlled, but colder now. "You often speak about reclaiming your narrative," he said. "Yet critics argue that your public story shifts depending on the platform. One version for American audiences, another for British ones. Which is the real one?" Meghan smiled faintly. "The one people choose to hear." Kevin's jaw tightened slightly. "That sounds like a convenient way to avoid inconsistency." "It sounds like reality," she replied. "Media filters everything, including your questions." A few people in the audience reacted with soft laughter, nervous, uncertain. Kevin nodded slowly as if accepting the challenge. "Let's test that," he said. "You've described your time in the UK as emotionally damaging. Yet at the same time, your global recognition comes largely from that period. Do you resent the place that created the platform you now use so freely?" Meghan's eyes flicked for a split second. A micro-reaction almost no one would have noticed. "Almost. Created," she repeated. "That's generous." Kevin leaned back. "You disagree? I earned every inch of it," she said calmly. "The platform already existed. I simply stood on it better than most." A ripple moved through the audience. Kevin looked directly at her now. "So the institution mattered, but not the people within it." Meghan tilted her head. "Institutions don't suffer, people do." "That wasn't my question," Kevin replied. "And it wasn't a helpful framing," she shot back. The temperature in the studio rose, not in volume but in pressure. The director cut to a tighter shot. No one wanted to miss a blink. Kevin tapped the desk with 2 fingers. "You speak often about truth," he said. "Yet several of your personal accounts have been publicly disputed. Journalists, biographers, even former allies have contradicted parts of your story. Are they all lying?" Meghan's smile didn't fade, but it hardened. "Kevin," she said softly, "disagreement is not deception." "Neither is verification," he replied. The audience murmured again. Meghan's posture shifted slightly forward now, still controlled, but no longer relaxed. "Verification by whom?" she asked. "By tabloids that built empires on distortion." Kevin's voice sharpened just a degree. "By records, timelines, witnesses." Meghan gave a slight dismissive shrug. "Truth doesn't require consensus," she said. "Only conviction." Kevin stared at her for a moment longer than necessary. "That's a dangerous philosophy," he said quietly. "Only to people who profit from being believed," she replied. A hush fell over the studio. No laughter this time. Kevin inhaled slowly. "Let's move to finances," he said, since perception and conviction seemed to be central themes. Meghan's eyes flickered again, this time unmistakably. "You built a commercial empire on personal storytelling," Kevin continued. "Streaming deals, documentaries, speaking tour. Would you accept that your private life has now become your primary product?" Meghan's lips pressed together briefly before she answered. "I would call it ownership," she said. "I decide how my story is told." "And the price tag?" Kevin asked, her eyes narrowed. "My boundaries are not commodities," she said firmly. Kevin didn't. "Let it go, yet everything surrounding them appears to be." Meghan leaned forward for the first time in the interview, resting her forearms lightly on her knees. "You're confusing access with ownership," she said. "A very common mistake among commentators." Kevin met her gaze without blinking. "Commentators don't usually sign 8-figure contracts for vulnerability," he replied. The audience reacted audibly this time, a wave of surprised breath and whispers. Meghan's smile vanished entirely for a heartbeat before she rebuilt it. "You sound bitter," she said lightly. "Is that personal or professional?" Kevin's eyes hardened. "It's journalistic," he said. "Then you might want to check your bias," Meghan replied smoothly, "because it's beginning to show." Kevin straightened in his seat. "Bias doesn't come from questions," he said. "It comes from avoiding answers." Meghan lifted her chin. "I've answered everything. You've deflected everything," he corrected. The room went still. Even the crew behind the cameras paused their movements. For the first time, Meghan's confidence showed a thin fracture at its edges. She picked up the mug again, took a slow sip, but her hand trembled just enough to be seen. Kevin watched it. Then he spoke quietly but firmly. "Let's see how long this composure really lasts." The camera tightened once more. And in homes across the UK, viewers felt it at the same time. The polite phase was over. What came next would not be controlled. The studio was still silent, too silent. This was the kind of quiet that comes just before something breaks. Kevin O'Sullivan had stopped circling. Meghan Markle had stopped pretending. And millions of viewers were about to witness the moment where politeness fully collapsed. The camera returned from the brief bumper to a noticeably different atmosphere. The lights were the same. The set was the same. But the air in the studio had thickened, heavy with unsaid words and rising impatience. Even the audience seemed to be sitting differently now, more alert, less entertained, more watchful. Kevin did not look at his notes anymore. He looked only at Meghan. "You've spoken publicly about truth, trauma, control, and narrative," he said evenly. "But there is one pattern that continues to follow every phase of your public life." Meghan crossed her arms slowly. "Patterns are often invented by people who need simple stories, or observed by those who recognize repetition," Kevin replied. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Kevin continued, quiet now, forcing the audience to lean in. "Every conflict you describe ends with the same conclusion. You are the victim, the institution is the villain, the critics are cruel, the press is corrupt. At what point does responsibility enter your version of events?" Meghan let out a soft laugh, not amused but dismissive. "That's a loaded question," she said. "You're framing me into a narrative you've already decided upon." Kevin nodded once. "Yes, I am, based on years of public record." Meghan's jaw tightened. "You sit behind that desk and pretend you're neutral," she said. "But you're not. You've never been neutral about me." "I'm neutral about power," Kevin replied, "and you now possess a great deal of it." She leaned forward again, this time without elegance. There was edge in every movement. "You confuse visibility with power," she said. A common mistake among men who think microphones are weapons. The audience gasped audibly this time. A few scattered claps erupted, quickly drowned out by shocked silence. Kevin's expression darkened. "Interesting," he said. "You regularly speak about breaking stereotypes, yet you're very quick to use them when it suits you." Meghan smiled coldly. "I use reality," she replied. "You just don't like how it reflects on you." Kevin inhaled slowly, visibly holding his temper in check. "Let's talk about public trust," he said, "because it is slipping. Polls, viewership fatigue, international skepticism. These aren't tabloid inventions. They're measurable." Meghan waved one hand dismissively. "Public trust is volatile," she said. "It rises and falls with attention. None of this is permanent." Kevin leaned closer across the desk. "Then why fight so ferociously to control it?" For a fraction of a second, Meghan said nothing. That pause, barely perceptible, was the loudest moment of the night. Her eyes hardened. "I don't fight to control anything," she said slowly. "I fight to survive a system that profits from tearing people apart." Kevin's voice lowered. "Yet somehow you always emerge with another platform, another deal, another global spotlight." Her lips curled slightly. "Because I'm good at what I do," she said. "And what is that exactly?" Kevin asked. She held his gaze, staying relevant. A shock wave moved through the audience. Some laughed in stunned disbelief. Others stared in visible discomfort. The illusion cracked. Kevin straightened fully now. "So relevance is the goal," he said. "Not reconciliation, not accountability, just endurance." Meghan shrugged. "Endurance is what history remembers." Kevin shook his head once slowly. "History also remembers its illusions." The atmosphere shifted palpably. Even the crew behind the cameras could be seen exchanging glances. The director's voice hissed faintly through Kevin's earpiece. He didn't react. Instead, he delivered the line that many viewers would replay for weeks. "The problem, Meghan," he said calmly, "is that illusions eventually demand payment." Her smile vanished. "What are you implying?" she asked sharply. "That every narrative, no matter how polished," Kevin replied, "eventually collides with contradiction." The audience fell completely silent now. Meghan's tone dropped, stripped of polish. "You're enjoying this," she said. "You've waited your whole career to speak to someone like me this way." Kevin didn't deny it. "I've waited to speak to someone who refuses to hear dissent," he said. "Yes," she leaned back, laughing coldly. "You're obsessed," she said. "It's almost flattering." "Obsession seeks control," Kevin answered. "Scrutiny seeks truth." Meghan shook her head. "Truth is subjective," she said. "Power decides what survives." Kevin lifted his hand slightly toward the audience. "Then let's ask them." A murmur burst through the room like a crack in glass. Meghan's eyes flashed toward the crowd. For the first time, something like uncertainty passed across her face. Kevin watched it happen, and in that instant, the balance of the room shifted. For the first time all night, Meghan was no longer performing for Kevin. She was performing for the audience, and the audience had begun to drift. The camera zoomed in. Kevin spoke again quietly. Now we reach the part of the conversation where control becomes very expensive. Meghan's fingers tightened against the arm of her chair. The composure she had worn like armor all night was beginning to fracture at the seams, and everyone from the control room to the living rooms across Britain could feel it. The next exchange would not remain professional. The camera returned from the last commercial break to a studio that felt physically heavier. The audience clapped on cue, but the sound was thin, uncertain, almost forced. Kevin sat rigid behind the desk, his papers finally pushed aside. Meghan remained in her chair, posture tall, face carefully composed, but the tension now radiated openly from both of them. Kevin did not waste a single second. "You've described yourself tonight as resilient, misunderstood, and endlessly scrutinized," he said. "But I want to ask you one simple thing." Meghan's smile was tight. "By all means," she replied. Kevin's eyes locked on hers. "Do you believe you have ever done anything wrong in the way you've handled your public life?" For the first time all evening, Meghan hesitated without masking it. "I believe I've done what I had to do," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked," Kevin pressed. "Wrong is not the same as necessary." Meghan's voice cooled. "I reject the premise of moral judgment from people who profit from my suffering." Kevin leaned forward. "And yet your suffering has become your most valuable asset." That sentence hit like a blow. Meghan's composure finally cracked. "That's vile," she snapped. "You sit there behind your desk and monetize cruelty while accusing me of doing the same. The hypocrisy is staggering." Kevin's restraint broke with it. "Hypocrisy?" he shot back. "You sell vulnerability as branding, then demand immunity from criticism. You claim independence while living entirely off public obsession. You condemn institutions while exploiting their legacy. That is not victimhood, that is strategy." The audience erupted. Gasps, shouts, clapping mixed with boos. The director's voice exploded through Kevin's earpiece, but he ignored it. Meghan stood abruptly. "You don't get to define me," she snapped. "You've been waiting years for this little performance." Kevin rose halfway from his chair. "And you've spent years rehearsing yours." Meghan's voice sharpened into open contempt. "This is exactly what people like you do. You provoke, degrade, and then hide behind journalism when challenged." Kevin's voice boomed now. "No, journalism challenges power, propaganda protects it, and tonight you walked in expecting to control this room." Meghan pointed at him. "You are nothing but a bitter commentator desperate for relevance." Kevin laughed once. "Short, sharp, humorless, and you are living proof that relevance without accountability eventually turns into arrogance." The control room lights began flashing. A producer rushed toward the stage edge, motioning urgently. The audience was fully divided now, noise crashing through the studio. Meghan turned toward the cameras. "Let the world see this," she said sharply. "Let them see how women are treated when they refuse to be submissive." Kevin slammed his hand on the desk. "Do not hide behind gender when challenged on behavior," he snapped. "That is the oldest manipulation in the book." Meghan's eyes blazed. "You are finished," she said coldly. Kevin straightened, towering now. "No," he replied, "this interview is." He turned toward the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, this was meant to be a conversation. What we witnessed instead was a public relations performance collapsing under scrutiny." Meghan lunged forward a step. "You do not get the final word," she snapped. Kevin's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This is my studio, my broadcast, and you no longer control this room." The producer rushed fully into frame now, whispering urgently. The director signaled to fade. The audience shouted. Meghan stared at Kevin in disbelief. "You think you've won?" she scoffed. Kevin's answer was quiet and devastating. "No," he said, but tonight the audience did. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Meghan picked up her mug and deliberately dropped it onto the floor, shattering it across the stage. The audience gasped in unison. "I'm done being interrogated by small men," she said. "Enjoy your little circus." She turned and walked off the set, heels striking the floor in sharp, furious rhythm. Kevin did not chase her. The cameras cut wide. The director's voice screamed for transition. The closing music began playing over the chaos. Kevin remained standing, hands on the desk, breathing heavy. He looked into the lens one final time. "Truth," he said, "is not something you perform. It is something that survives confrontation." The screen faded to black. Kevin O'Sullivan would later state only, "I asked questions. The reaction told the rest of the story." Meghan's team released a statement calling the broadcast a coordinated ambush. But one thing was undeniable. What just happened would never be remembered for another normal episode again. If this confrontation shocked you, you've only seen one side of what power looks like when it's challenged. Moments like these don't just reveal who speaks the loudest. They reveal who stands when the spotlight turns unforgiving. If you want more true-to-life confrontations, hidden power struggles, and stories that expose what really happens when the cameras don't protect anyone anymore, hit like to support the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell us in the comments whose side were you on, Kevin or Meghan? Because the next confrontation is already waiting behind the curtain.